Hypnoathletics is exercising your mind towards universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense. The website Hypnoathletics, which really I only used the subdomain, which the actual address is eym.hypnoathletics.com. The EYM being the initials abbreviation for exercising your mind, which is part of that mission statement. I don't know what I've been saving using the main domain hypnoathletics.com for, but I'm pretty sure that it will manifest sometime soon because I'm always creating and thinking. But March 2006 was the first blog that went online for hypnoathletics.com, eym.hypnoathletics.com. And about a year later, around March 2007, exercisingyourmind.com went online. And so while Hypnoathletics says Hypnoathletics is exercising your mind towards universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense, exercisingyourmind.com has the titles and taglines as Wealth Attraction Research, Great Health is the truest of all wealth. And so there have been things that seem to be deviations from those messages across time through the years. A lot of that is because of my ignorance and allowing myself to get caught up, being even hypnotized by the very prolific and loud conspiracy theory space. A lot of conspiracy theories out there, and I understand why, and a lot of what people are saying is justifiable and true. It's just that the way that it's done is a little bit kooky. When really, what's very interesting is something that I have understood and solidified even more and more as time goes along is a process of elimination. Meaning that I've long understood that one of the routes to significantly improved health is to remove toxins, activities, ideas, thoughts, environments from your experience as much as possible. So another way of saying that is that if anything that you consume, whether it be spiritually, mentally, physically, in the form of ideas, emotions, energy, words, people, food, anything that you consume or ingest, if it's what you should be seeking are the least toxic versions of them, and I say that very specifically, the least toxic versions, because a lot of things are very integrated and overlapping, and there's a lot of contamination of all kinds everywhere. And so, that's another way of saying nothing is absolutely black and white. There's a lot of overlap, a lot of gray areas, and very different, dare I say, shades of gray. I hesitated on that because there's a fictional story that is questionable that has that. But although I have borrowed and used that terminology in a blog that I published on hypnoathletics.com or eym.hypnoathletics.com that was called something like 51 Shades of Gray Aliens. And it was basically about the idea of about how things that are ambiguous, and this is part of my conspiracy theory type of, information, but how some ambiguous things might be hiding the truth. For example, area, and this is a tangent, I'm going off, I know, from healthy living and self-defense, but there's, Area 51 is this, sort of infamous military installation that people say that that either there are crash-landed spacecraft and or alien beings, whether alive or their bodies, there in this place, right? There's even a movie that's pretty funny called Paul, about a gray alien, as a comedy, and they even had a guy in there named Lorenzo Zoil, and that was a really clever play on the words Lorenzo's oil, which is a remedy for something called adrenoleukodystrophy, which uses a process called competitive inhibition with these long-chain fatty acids that helped to alleviate the symptoms and the negative effects of this very debilitating and lethal disease that happens in young boys. And there's a whole movie called Lorenzo's Oil about it, starring Nick Nolte and oh my gosh, the actress's name, and she is significant because I actually really like her, but my mind is not capturing her name right now. Nick Nolte, and well, hopefully it'll come to me later, but there's a lot of stuff about that movie, and I just think that it's interesting how a lot of those things and these different messages for those in the know about it. But the 51 Shades of Grey Aliens was, I dabble in, and I'm saying that kind of modestly, but I'm pretty much an expert in numerology, even though, many people in scientific and more empirical fields of study would say that it's a pseudoscience, but I'm pretty well versed in okay, I don't know what is, I guess 4:37 right now. The traffic is really ridiculous, and what I'm trying to do is proving to be difficult. So in numerology, though, it's alphanumeric, and every letter has a number assigned to it, a numeral that corresponds with it, depending on its position in whatever alphabet or writing system you're using. And so what I found was that when you look at the word Area 51, or even, the word gray, right? The word gray in American English, Gray, actually adds up to the number 51. So G being the 7th letter of the alphabet, R being the 18th, right? So you have 7 plus 18 is 25, right? And then A being 1, so that's 26. And then Y being the 25th letter of the alphabet, so 26 plus 25 is 51. So Area 51 literally could mean area gray, which could be an area where the gray aliens are, or in the same way how some languages have adjectives before or after the noun. For example, like in Spanish, you would say, instead of saying a black cat like we say in English, they say gato negro, gato being the word for cat, negro being black, right? So gray area could be area gray, like Area 51 could be area gray, right? Or it could be area gray, Area 51, the area where the gray aliens are. Or it could literally just mean a gray area, where we're being ambiguous. It's literally a term that is signifying ambiguity in its most top form. And so things like that. And I've been, so I as I said, it's a little tangent, but focusing back in here, hypnoathletics is exercising your mind toward universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense. Exercisingyourmind.com, wealth attraction research, great health is the truest of all wealth. I'm establishing here that I've been online with these ideas for 20 years, and that the process of elimination has proven to be one of the most formidable ways to improve your health, meaning that instead of trying to add various different kinds of exercises or supplements or injections or medications or surgeries or different things, one of the most effective ways to improve your health is to eliminate the amounts of molecules and substances that you're putting in your body, especially if you don't know what they are, if you can't identify, if you haven't read about what they are, and especially if you know what they are and you know they're not really good for you, according to all of the research that you can find. The process of elimination is one of the best things that you can do for your health. And it has many relatives, such as fasting, for example, and cleanses, where people are abstaining from and refraining from putting certain things in their body. It's really, really super simple. And that is an idea that, really, really deserves a lot more attention. As a matter of fact, just a few days ago, about I think it's 5 or 6 days now, there was a medical doctor, and I don't recall his name, but on YouTube, who was basically saying the exact same thing that I'm saying now about the removal of substances, rather than this whole idea of trying to add things and do more in order to to get the best out of our health, is that we could benefit from the removal of toxins and substances from our bodies. And it's one of the main things that he was saying, and it had to do with this idea of removing stuff. So anyway, but I also, and I left a comment on his video that, over 20 years ago, I heard Dr. Andrew Weil, who's a medical doctor as well, talking about this in his 8 weeks to optimum health. And this physician on this video has some program that's called, like, I forget, it's something with the number 60, because it's 60 days and it's a 60-day protocol. And that number comes up everywhere, because I also learned about the hypoglycemic diet, which needs to be applied over 60 days, from my time as a student at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where I got my degree in clinical hypnosis. And hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar, it contributes to a whole slew of ridiculous symptoms that even can present themselves as serious psychiatric disorders, but also make people hypersuggestible and is responsible for a lot of irrational fears, which are known as phobias. And so you got, Dr. John Kappas, who founded the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, talking about the hypoglycemic diet requiring 2 months or 60 days. You've got Dr. Andrew Weil, 8 weeks to optimum health. 8 weeks is approximately, there's 4 months in a year, so 8 weeks are approximately 60 days, although it's more like 56 if we really want to do a 7-day week. But still, the 60-day protocol, and then this other MD. So there's a lot of support for this idea of these 60-day or 8-week protocols of correcting various different imbalances or deficits in the body. So, and it's something that I have been experimenting for many years. I have so much evidence now, anecdotal and this personal evidence, of how I've just roller coastered through my life, trying out to see if I could do various different things, meaning can I drink a lot of alcohol, get drunk to the point where I'm throwing up and hungover for days, and still be a high performance athlete? Can I smoke cigarettes, and if I just crank up my exercise? Can I vape? Can I smoke weed? Can I, all these other things that people consider partying and living a little and all this other? Can I do that stuff? But I realized that I can't serve the two masters. I can't serve God and Mammon. I'm not able to be a high-performing athlete and do these various different mind-altering substances. It doesn't work for me. Maybe it might work for other people, but I think that, and I understand that in general, that's just not gonna fly. It's not true. It won't work for a lot of people. And my understanding from my experience, what I'm seeing, what I'm observing, is that many people are in fact attempting to do that. They're attempting to be able to serve these two masters of health and I don't know what else you would call the other thing, not unhealthy, healthy and unhealthy. You can't really serve both of them. It's very difficult. It's actually, probably like one of the causes of burnout. When you focus on consuming, ingesting, and participating in healthy and beneficial activities, foods, experiences, your existence in general becomes more efficient at everything. You think more clearly, you get more done in a lot less time, you spend more money and you spend less time. So these, it's interesting that a lot of times people say time is money, and we can spend time and we can spend money, like spend time with someone or spend money on something, right? And pay attention. So what we pay attention to, what we spend our time on, what we spend our money on, right? All of these types of currency, which is really our life, what we dedicate and focus our life on, those are exactly the results we're going to get. And that one saying that says you are what you eat, can be generalized to you are what you consume. You are, what you allow in your body. It's the same thing. Garbage in, garbage out. Treasure in, treasure out. It happens in your body. The better, higher quality ingredients you put in, the better your body builds itself up, and the better and more efficiently you move, and the more often you move, and moving in certain ways, the better your body performs. It's pretty interesting. It's very close to, it's a law of life. It's a law of existence. And I don't know what kind of research has been done on that, but I'm pretty sure that if research was organized around such a thing, it would be shown empirically to be irrefutable that this is the truth, that basic idea of what you consume in various different ways, spiritually, mentally, physically, which I understand to all be the same thing. They're all one. Those are the results you're going to get, period. And we know this intuitively, and we also know this experientially. And like I said, it's quite possible, more than possible, that there's actual scientific research done on this, or at least scientific research that will correlate with what I'm saying very, very clearly, very exactly, 1-to-1 ratio. So there's not a lot really to unpack about that. It's actually so simple, and this is one of the reasons why things like this are overlooked. And then also because, there are a lot of messages out there that steer people and distract people away from this very essential and fundamental and necessary knowledge and understanding. And a lot of those messages are simply because of, self-interest. There are organizations, companies, businesses, governments even, various different organizations and structures of all kinds, systems that, even though their intention may not be to harm people directly, the practices of profit, which is how can we get people through, food chemistry and food science, for example, to be as addicted as possible to our food, so they keep coming back for more and more, so we can sell as much as it is possible. but in making it and manufacturing it, we spend the least amount of money as possible. You know, this is arbitrage, right? It's getting more out than what you put in. That's the essence of all business, really, and investing, is how can you get out of something more than you put in. And, you know, like, people want to buy low and sell high is really the idea of it. How can we buy these chemicals and these different substances to make these foods, and so we can sell it at a much higher price to make a profit? And even though the intent might not be malicious, it might just only be selfish, a lot of times it turns out to hurt a lot of people because of that method, that way of practicing. And unfortunately, the messages in the advertising and just the marketing in general it's extremely sophisticated, or those messages are extremely sophisticated, as well as the end product, which aren't really helpful. And so what you have is a really powerful self-reinforcing process of where all of not only the addictive foods, but you have these addictive messages, and the combination of that just keeps people coming back for more. And I'm just focusing on the food right now because it's a really big deal when it comes to healthy living. It's a major factor. And again, this comes from direct personal experience and experience working with clients for many years as a clinical hypnotherapist, as a personal fitness trainer, as a group fitness instructor, and as a martial arts instructor and self-defense instructor. So overall, I'm like a super-powered life coach. I have a lot of different avenues to follow. I'm also an ordained minister and a metaphysical scientist, and my ordination comes from Wisdom of the Heart Church in California, which is the same organization that started the University of Metaphysical Sciences, both of which were founded by Christine Breese. And it is a school that is off the beaten path. It's not your normal school. It's not part of the mainstream school system, which is one of the reasons I like it. The Hypnosis Motivation Institute actually is. And so I've got, you know, I'm straddling a very interesting fence, that I have formal education that comes from two differently regarded organizations. But I've integrated them, and I've even created something that I'm developing called the Institute of Metaphysical Hypnosis, because I realized that almost everything in the supernatural, paranormal, and metaphysical studies correlates very directly with what I've learned about hypnosis and clinical hypnosis. And in fact, pretty much almost everything that we do in life has a correlation in that way, which is also why I created an acronym that helps to describe that, which is PITCH, P-I-T-C-H, which informs that programming, influencing, training, conditioning, and hypnosis are synonymous. They're the same thing, just looked at from different perspectives. In the same way that there were once 5 string theories, string theory being a very specific niche in quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And at one point in time, there were 5 different string theories, but then came along this mathematical physicist named Ed Witten, who looked at it and said, these are all the same thing, just being looked at from 5 different perspectives, and unified them, and string theory became M theory. So it still is string theory, but it's known as M theory as well. But instead of having 5 different ones, which was somewhat embarrassing for the string theorist, now there's only one, and one for them to focus on. And string theory is one of these theoretical physics disciplines that is attempting to unify classical mechanics, or even more specifically Einstein's general relativity and the gravitational force, with what can be described through quantum mechanics, which are the other 3 fundamental forces: the strong nuclear force, strong force, the weak nuclear force, and electricity and magnetism, which were also unified under the Standard Model of Physics in 1972 by Yusuf Salam and Harvey Weinberg, I think it is, and one other guy. In 1972, they won a Nobel Prize for unifying those things, but gravity's still not part of it. But string theory says that it can be done. But my point being that I look at those 5 things as well: PITCH, programming, influencing, training, conditioning, and hypnosis. They're all the same thing, just being looked at from different perspectives. And in fact, even what I'm doing now by speaking and recording, which I've been doing for years with the written and spoken word, are messages that are intended to deliver a beneficial programming, influencing, training, conditioning, and hypnosis to help people move towards the results they desire, which is to improve their quality of life. And my delivery system happens to be healthy living and self-defense, which takes the forms of all of those different things: metaphysical sciences, clinical hypnosis, fitness training, and martial arts and self-defense. They're really all the same thing to me, because they're all different ways that people are looking to improve their lives, to have more confidence, to experience a better quality of life. And I've even given, I love the acronyms, and so I've even given a name to what I'm doing now, to when I do it on a one-on-one level, person to person, it's called PACTS, PACTS, which is an acronym for Personally Attuned Conversational Transformation Sessions. Because I've learned through practice, through experience, that I can speak to people, and one-to-one or one-to-many, like this recording is one-to-many, and I can do that, and through my conversational style, I can affect transformations in people's lives. And it happens all the time. And I have people, and there's so many things that it's pretty incredible when I look at it, but there are so many things that I have planted seeds into society that I'm seeing people practice, things that people are saying that I was the originator of, and nobody knows anything about that. Years ago, back in 2013, 2014, I remember I coined the term "feed 2 birds with 1 seed" because I don't like when I just don't like it. It might seem silly, but I don't like when people say, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I understand it, comes from like some maybe slingshot. I'm actually not sure the origin, but I'm not really keen on killing birds, right? There's enough of that in the world. There's chickens, which are birds, right? We have to kill them to, they go to the slaughterhouse so that we can eat chicken, right? But I just wasn't really feeling that so much directly in the language all the time. It's not like people need to talk about killing. So I basically said feed 2 birds with 1 seed. And there was this guy named Justin who was part of this organization that I had been to some of their events, and he started using my term and didn't even give me credit for it. And he was wildly popular at the time. I'm just going to say the initials of his last name is V, Justin V. And that's all I'm going to say, because I'm not going to hype him up, because I don't like what he did. Not only that, and just other things that he did, but certain things like that. Or, there are so many other things that I've talked about. I saw or heard in a video that like a bunch of AI systems have picked up various different things that I've said. I don't get any credit credit for it. I'm not even going to get into but there's a whole lot of it, and it's spooky, creepy, and weird in a lot of ways. And I would be upset about it if I didn't establish long ago that I realized that I'm never going to run out of ideas, and also that there's really nothing new under the sun, as the saying goes. And so I've also realized there's a lot of conclusions that I've come to myself independently that have already been established in other industries. I just didn't know it. One of them is, so for example, I created something called the emotional incubation method. And the emotional incubation method makes use of, for example, Hebbian learning, which is in popular culture known as, nerves that fire together, wire together. And so I realized by studying various different phenomena in neuroscience, for example, like I'm a lucid dreamer, so I began studying lucid dreaming some years ago and just learning different things about that, and also just dreaming and sleeping in general. And because of, the word hypnosis is derived from the god of sleep, Hypnos, which Morpheus is the god of dreams, and we know the word Morpheus became very popular in the Matrix, unless you were already into Greek mythology. But from various different phenomena in sleep, like for example the fact that there are sleepwalkers. In hypnosis we have a term for those, somnambulists, which are people that are super highly suggestible. I actually understand that I am a somnambulist. I'm super highly suggestible, but I'm also now very aware of that, so I make use of it. It's actually a superpower because it helps me to learn things and retain them very quickly. But people who, and also as a lucid dreamer, sometimes one of the things that happens, especially with sleepwalkers, is that the processes that inhibit their motor neurons from them acting out, because sleepwalking is not restricted to getting up and actually walking, but it's doing things like you can move your feet, your legs, punch, kick, even talking. These are just all different gradients on the spectrum of sleepwalking, of things that happen. But that mechanism fails to immobilize, and people start acting out their dreams. And so this is something that we also make use of in something called visual motor behavior rehearsal, which has been used with many professional and amateur athletes, specifically first deployed in the Olympics. I think the psychologist who started doing it, I think his name was John Gray. He was featured in the book and the video for the Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And then also something that is a little bit more entrenched, even though I do have a couple research papers that I looked at for visual motor behavior rehearsal, or VMBR. But then there's also another phenomenon called echo neurons and mirror neurons. And so mirror neurons were discovered when researchers had various different devices hooked up to monkeys, and they were mapping how their nervous system worked in their motor neurons. And they found that when a monkey looked at another monkey picking up food and putting it in its mouth, for example, the same exact nerves fired in the same order as if the monkey that was looking at the other monkey, as if it was doing it also, but just at a sub-activated level. And so this also happens in visual motor behavior rehearsal, and it's what happens when we dream as well. Dreaming is a form of rehearsal, like visual motor behavior rehearsal, and so is observing. And we know this, like when somebody's showing us or teaching us martial arts and they show us something, we mimic it. That's what that is. That's the reason why we can do it, because it happens on a sub-activation level first, and then we are able to repeat the movements that we see. So I started calling this neural sub-activation, only to learn, I was like, in 2025, after all these years of doing this, that there's actually a neuroscientific correlate to that called sub-threshold activation. So I was calling it neural sub-activation, and then I found out there was something that correlates with it called sub-threshold activation. And so in saying this, I'm just saying that nothing new under the sun, but that also a lot of times people can come to exact conclusions, call them different things, or they even have the same process, like Isaac Newton and Leibniz came up with different kinds of calculus around the same time. And so, there's also a lot of things like that. Like I could be seeing that there are things that I think are being copied from me, but it could also just be other people are cognating the same things from their experience. Where is it all coming from? Maybe there's a deep, long history of genetic memory in humans, and that could be it. I don't know. I just know that it's fascinating, and I think it's a pretty wonderful thing that we as human beings can advance in very different ways and come to some of the same conclusions, and especially when we have a goal, of which my goal is optimizing human experience and performance and the quality of life. And what's really interesting is that no matter how complicated you think you're going to get, it's really actually simple. And it just simply comes from clean living, which has to do with the least toxic amounts of water and food that you can put in your body, efficient and safe movement, and an adequate rest. It's actually no more difficult than that at all. There's really nothing more to say about it. But as this doctor I was talking about earlier said, those, you can't really package up and sell those things, although I think he's incorrect about that, because that's what in a way what life coaching can be, is that, but it requires a lot of contact, which is also one of the reasons why I am producing so much content. I'm just producing copious amounts of content when I'm driving, like I am right now, and my stream of consciousness and things that come from my experiences and understanding, and then I'm just sharing it en masse without editing these things, because there's no reason to try to cut down on. I know it's a completely different approach from what a lot of people do. Some people like things really polished and clean, but I've been pioneering this thing that I'm calling lo-fi podcasts, where like I'm driving and you hear all the background noise, or I'll be in a cafe or something like that, and that's just the way that I'm delivering it. And right now, speaking of delivering, I'm going to drop something off and I'll be back and finish this up. So really, it's not complicated. We can make the best of our experiences by eliminating, rather than thinking that we need to add to our experience. And there's some pushback. I hear a lot of people apologizing for this idea of eliminating negative relationships and people and toxic people from your life, and they say, and because I get this too, especially you got to be careful of it, because cults do this, right? They isolate and separate people from their families and friends and their lifelines. However, a lot of this is very important for people to actually do when considered carefully how you're doing it and why you're doing it. And so, even though, for example, you might have family and friends, and you might feel obligated to stay connected to them because of either history or bloodlines. But this is not this is not a rule that needs to be followed. I'm not trying to break up families, and I know there's a lot of traditional stuff and a lot of traditional people out there. But, like, for example, you know, I live close to two of my sisters and one of my brothers and my dad, and I don't really see them that much. I just saw my sister at the gym. But the truth of the matter is that we live completely different lifestyles in a lot of ways. And I'm just not into the things that they're into a lot. And it's distracting if I try to be. So if you really think about it in those terms, right? It's really just me optimizing my time and being more efficient. And, you know, there are holidays. My sister, she has, you know, she's had Thanksgiving dinners at her house, and and the thing is that she's very, as my niece says, she's a crunchy mom, right? She does her best to buy the organic and you know, the least toxic amount of things like that. And I don't know if she was always like that, but she's started to focus on that more and more, which I think is great. And, you know, but that's my point. It's like, I'm not avoiding them because I hate them or anything like that. It's just that we have different lifestyles. I remember the same feeling when I was growing up as a kid. And my parents would take us to different aunts and uncles' houses. And they were just like people who would sit around and watch TV and smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol and just do stuff that was whack to me. That's an 80s term, right? It was just whack. It was just, I wasn't into that. I wanted to be riding my bike, riding my skateboard, climbing trees, throwing shurikens, playing with nunchucks, you know, doing spin kicks, flips, cartwheels, climbing, jumping, running. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be in some stuffy apartment with some cigarette smokers whose apartment smelled stale of cigarettes and beer and like junk food, and like I just wasn't into that. And it's like, that's why I just felt so weird. It's like, go over and hug your auntie or say hi. I was like, no, I don't want to deal with these people and their boring, stupid lives. Like, to me, right? I've been like that for a long time. It's not like it's something new. It's not like, you know, and my mom, she would often say that I was like the Hulk, that I would just Hulk out. I didn't like things, and I would just, you know, throw a tantrum because I didn't like to be forced. And they realized at a very young age, just leave me alone. Because I would actually, there was times I remember as young as being 4 years old where my parents would argue or get into it, or just something was happening that I didn't like, and I would literally just escape out of the house. I would leave the house. I'd climb out of a window or go through the front or back door when they were in some heated discussion about something like that. And the police would come and find me. And my parents, they were freaked out. My dad, you know, he would get angry. My mom would be crying and glad that I was back. But the police would have to come find me. I would be at different playgrounds on the swings or the monkey bars, and the police would say, your parents are looking for you, what are you doing? I was like, I just left. I wouldn't give them any explanation. It's like, I didn't feel like being there. And there was at least one or two times where it would be like a day later, and even to the point where, you know, I thought at one time I was going to run away from home. I tried to ride my bike from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando, and I finally moved from my parents and was in and out of their house. When I was 15, I moved in with a friend, Mike. His parents let me stay there. I just didn't want to be. And then I ended up going out to California and all of that. And I mean, I even would leave school. You know, I remember in kindergarten, I would just leave. There was, when we were in the playground or whatever, the fence was unlocked, and I would leave and just go home. I just was never into, when people were just doing stuff I didn't like, just like, I'm leaving. I don't have to deal with this. I've done it for jobs. There's been times when I've had no place to live, no other income, and that was my only line to having an income or job or even community. And I've had managers say certain things that I didn't like, or even more recently, a couple of years ago, a friend that I've known for like over 20 years who owns a huge company that I was working with and said things I didn't like, and I would just be like, I'm done. I didn't give them any explanation. I'll just leave. You know, that's just how I operate. It's like, I don't like something, I'm not going to stick around for it. So all of that is to say also, you know, leaving toxic things behind or what you don't like, there's nothing, you know, everything's okay with that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all good. You can do that. You just have to understand, though, that everything that you do is going to have consequences. You know, I remember I lost a lot of friends one time when I was sitting at home and I was reading a new book that I had gotten, and this friend called me on the phone and was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm reading a book." It's like, "You're not going to do anything today? You're not going out or anything?" I said, "No, I'm at home reading a book." He says, "Come on, aren't you going to go out and do something?" I said, "No, I want to read this book." And he's like, "Come on, man, you got to come out. Like, aren't you doing anything?" I said, "No, why? What's going on with you? I just want to sit home. I got a new book I want to read." And he says, "It's your birthday." And I thought, "Oh yeah, I guess it is." And maybe I did buy the book for myself for my birthday. And I said, "Nah, boy, I appreciate that. You want to hang out over," but I was like, "I'd rather just, I'm at home and I would rather just be reading my book on my birthday." And he's like, "Well, I'm already on my way." I said, "All right." So he picks me up, takes me to his house. I walk in the door, surprise, there's a whole bunch of people there. And about 15 minutes into it, I was like, this is not good. And I left. I didn't say anything to anybody. And you know what? A whole bunch of those people, there were like 30 people there, probably half of them, more than half of them didn't talk to me again, or if they ran into me, were just polite maybe, but just didn't have anything to do with me anymore. And I'm fine with that. Those are the consequences of my actions. But you don't try to force me to do anything. Like, I just don't care about those certain things. It's how I've been, and I don't have any desire to change that. It's not good for me, and I will refuse to put myself under stress or in situations that are not serving me. The world that we live in is difficult enough without us having to add things to our lives that are going to make things more challenging. It's already crazy enough, you'll hear things about the wealth gap and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and people moving into trailer communities or living in their cars, or that it's people are increasingly, like, people are working, Gen Z is working so much, but nobody's buying homes anymore. Nobody's having sex anymore. People are having less and less babies, and all of this stuff like this. And it's because people are working so much and stressing themselves out, and they have almost no time to do anything. So I've long understood that it's a very bad idea for me to do things that I feel are wastes of my time, when time is already so limited as it is, just because of so much of what we have to do in order to earn money and to have the resources just for the most basic fundamentals of life is already super challenging as it is. And there may even be systems and institutions and structures in place that are very well intended to keep this wealth gap and this divide as it is. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to operate under the assumption for now, and until I die, that I can change my situation in life and I can keep improving. Why do I think that? Well, I have several times. I continue several times to keep upgrading and learning how to be more efficient and having experiences. Even the stage where I am in my life right now is completely different from where I was before. Specifically meaning that I've learned a lot more. I understand, like, for example, I started working in film and TV as an independent contractor back in 1999 or 1998. And so I realized there's a way to earn money where you don't have to have a job. You can just you can work as an independent contractor or a freelancer. And so it's just been something that I've understood for a long time. So I changed my situation all the time. Sometimes I'll have a job, sometimes I won't. And it depends on what kind of job it is also. I realized that I've basically made my rounds in only a few different professions because, once again, I refuse to do things that I don't want to do. So I do security work at bars and nightclubs. I work in the film and TV industry in the art department or in production. I work as a personal fitness trainer and or martial arts instructor, right? Either doing personal training or groups. And while all that's been going on, I've always been a multimedia producer. I've always been recording things and writing things down and sharing them with people. Just that's what I've been doing the whole time. I've basically been autobiographical, scientific documentation, and journalistic exposition. And I'm borrowing those terms from, I once heard those labels used to describe Jack Herer, who was known as the Emperor of Hemp, and it was said that his books are part autobiography, part scientific document, and part journalistic expose. And when I heard it, I said, yeah, that sums me up pretty well. My life is like that. So, and I'm at this stage in my life where I've added doing gig work, because I'm not always doing film and TV gigs, and I have traveled. I've gone to California and Florida, and I've done work in film and TV in both of those places, but I'm not doing it all the time, and so I've got to fill in those gaps. But also, getting a job is really kind of a no-no for me, because my temperament has gotten to the point where it's less and less tolerable for me. And so gig work is one of the things that I can do on my own time, and it allows me to do a lot of other things. I've written and published books now. I'm able to produce a lot more podcasts. I'm able to train martial arts more on my own time. I am making music more and practicing and playing my guitar. So it's just allowing me to do so much more in between the other gigs that I would rather be doing. But instead of having a job where I have to quit or put in time or ask for time off, I'll do gig work. And then when I get into some film or TV production, I'll go do that. Or if I get to teach some classes or various different things that are coming up, like I'm going to be presenting, I'm doing a workshop and speaking at the first annual Virginia Beach Healthy Living Expo coming to Neptune Park and the oceanfront on May 2nd and May 3rd. So, and I'm using that as an opportunity to springboard some more of my teaching of my style of capoeira that's called capoeira, Kappaguerra, all one word, stylized with a capital K and a capital G. Capoeira is the only war to wage is within. And one of those wars is really being aware of what we put into our bodies, what we put into our minds, and our consciousness. And that's what this really has been all about. And I've given various different stories and examples from my life, and also just some very simple and practical things, and how there is a lot of evidence and a lot of support for the ideas that there's really nothing new under the sun, but they need to continue to be reiterated, retold, because there's so much information coming out there to the contrary that someone like me who understands programming, influencing, training, conditioning, and hypnosis, I understand that I need to personally attune conversational transformation as sessions like this recorded session that is going to be relevant to people who need to continue to hear these messages. We are the sum total of the 5 to 7 people we spend our time with, and in these days we spend time in parasocial relationships, like you're listening to me and you're choosing to listen to me. And it's very important that you do that, because I am giving information, I am sharing information about my life and things that actually work. No gimmicks, no fluff, no run around, just like, this is how I'm living, and it is paying off dividends. I mean, and I have video evidence of it. I'm 48 years old, and I'm literally doing backflips and 540-degree spins through the air and 5-minute rounds of kickboxing, and which reminds me, I have a whole bunch of videos I haven't published yet, which I'm about 20 pounds heavier than I am now. I just weighed myself today for the first time in a long time. I'm at a weight that I really like, which is 185 pounds. I'll probably drop down to maybe 180 or 175. 180 because that's Spider-Man's weight, and he's my height as well, 5'10". But just the way that I'm eating and operating and living, it seems like my body weight is going to drop even more. The heaviest I ever was when I got back from China was 221 pounds, but I was still doing 5-minute rounds of kickboxing, pacing myself. But there's a lot of improvement. There's always room for improvement. At least that's how I operate. And so I was talking about that there's video evidence because, there's a lot of people that will go online and that will try to sell you things, and they're showing off their bodies. They're showing that they have muscles, they're showing these workout routines, but what it really comes down to is basically a lot of not really optimized bodybuilding. Because a lot of people will teach you, you go to the gym and you do back and bis, you do chest and tries, you do legs one day, and then you do cardio and abs another day. And this is really just doing things for muscular hypertrophy and body sculpting to make your body look a certain way, but it's not the most healthy way to do unless you're combining it with mobility exercises or something like capoeira or martial arts and various different movements like yoga and different things where you're mixing it up and you're doing a lot of actual exercises that are functional to your body, that serve a purpose. To me, martial arts serves a great purpose, and the way that I train is not just for martial arts, it's just for everyday survival and movement. I'm like a spider monkey, just jumping around, climbing, spinning, and running over everything. And so I've been recording these things for years. I've been on YouTube since like 2005 or 2006, something like that. So you can see way back then me just showing off capoeira, and even to this very day doing the exact same movements I was doing 20 years ago. So there's evidence of it. It's not just me talking about it. These things that I'm saying are very important because they actually yield real results. And that's really what it all comes down to, is what the criteria for you believing, saying, and doing anything is, does it help you to continuously and consistently achieve the results you desire? And so first you have to clarify what results you desire. What is success to you? I borrow the definition of success from Earl Nightingale, who says success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And my worthy ideal is achieving optimum health, because I realized that in my wealth attraction research, I found out and discovered that great health is the truest of all wealth. And part of being great health is me being able to be hyper athletic as long as I possibly can, because it's fun to me. I enjoy it. I get great joy from being able to run, jump, climb, spin, flip, crawl, squat, kick. All of that stuff is fun to me. It's been fun to me ever since I was a child, and I've never stopped doing it. I've always continued to do that. And so that's what I can share from my life experience. I know how to optimize that and get that done. And a lot of people will benefit from being able to train their body so that they can do just as much and more as well. And so that's really what it all comes down to, is your criteria for believing, for thinking, for speaking, for doing anything is, does it help you to consistently achieve the results that you desire? That's the bottom line. And that's what I do, and that's what this information that I've been sharing and what I am sharing. And so I started off by saying that hypnoathletics is exercising your mind towards universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense. That's what I do. I am a healthy living and self-defense coach. I'm a healthy living and self-defense programmer, influencer, trainer, conditioner, and hypnotist. And that is what you will find throughout all of my history of being online. You can search it anywhere. That's what I'm all about. I am Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.